everyone. Welcome to the March 17th edition of the TimeformUS Forecast. I'm David Aragona here with my usual co-host Craig Milkowski, and it's a little bit of a lull in the racing calendar this weekend. We've been talking about Derby prep races almost every week going back to January. None of those taking place this week. There are just no Kentucky Derby qualifying point races on the calendar for this March 18th, March 19th weekend, but we're going to dive right back into the swing of things next week with those final round of Derby preps, which take place from March 25th through the first couple weeks in April. But this week, just a limited amount of stakes racing or graded stakes racing taking place around the country. Greg and I were having a bit of a conversation about what to do on the podcast this week, and we did settle upon Aqueduct. That was actually Craig's decision to go to Aqueduct, and I'm always pleased to talk about these Aqueduct races. We're going to discuss the late pick 5 sequence there on Saturday, races 6 through 10. This is a 15% takeout pick 5 for those of you that do note that stuff. And it's an interesting sequence in terms of the different kinds of races involved, Greg. We do have the Cicada Stakes, which is the feature, but surrounding that stakes, we've got a variety of levels. A low $8,000 claiming race, which you don't often see at this time of year, a couple of New York bred maiden races, and a pretty high quality New York bred allowance race.
Yeah, I really like this sequence. As you mentioned, it was my choice here, and I'm always happy to pick your brain on these. As you know, I don't get to follow the NIVER circuit as closely as I used to. I mean, I watch it pretty much every day that it's on the Fox channel, but just not the in-depth following of it that you do as part of your job. So I just thought it was a really good betting sequence. There were some other places that had some sexier races. Oaklawn had a couple nice stakes, but wasn't a big fan of the surrounding races. So I just thought this was a really interesting sequence. And in that law you mentioned from the Derby Trail, I thought it was kind of good to dig in and do some serious handicapping.
Yeah, this, of course, is an all-dirt sequence. That's what we've got at Aqueduct this time of year. No turf racing just yet, but we do have a variety of distances in this sequence, so we'll start talking about it with race 6. It is a New York-bred maiden special weight event for the 3-year-old fillies. This one is going the 7-furlong distance. We've got a field of 9 signed on, and Craig, this is one of the more wide-open races in the sequence. I think there are many places to go because the horse that I installed as the lukewarm morning line favorite, the number 8 Clover Street. I will say she does seem like a horse that will appreciate that there's no rain predicted this weekend because she's run much better in terms of speed figures on her fast tracks than she has in some of her sloppy or muddy track races. But that said, it's not like she's running that fast in any of her starts, and she's not one that I'm viewing as being that formidable.
No, she's run 4 races. She's yet to hit the 70 mark on the Timeform US speed figures. The race rating is a 72. So for me, that's kind of a yellow light right there, a cautionary sign to not be too excited about the favorite.
Yeah, she can obviously win, but the race that she's coming out of, that February 20th maiden race, I just didn't think there was a whole lot to it. I mean, she was 8-5 that day and couldn't quite get the job done. A first-time starter for trainer David Donk won that race, and he's not a trainer that's really known for connecting with firsters that often. So I viewed Clover Street as one that might be a bit of an underlay in this sequence. Craig, there are some other places to go with lightly raced horses, but I do want to talk about one more that has plenty of experience, and that's the number 6 Dream on Cara. And she's arguably a little more appealing, even though she's the most experienced member of this field and arguably has less upside than others in here. She's run some faster speed figures and has at least kept better company.
Yeah, that's what my notes say, that she does have the speed figures to win this race. It's a little concerning for me that she hasn't really come very close. Her last race was her best race, where she was only beaten 5 1/4 lengths. She did that one time on turf as well, but margins tend to be a little tighter on turf. So I would say this is her closest finish. She doesn't have much early speed at all. So for me, I was kind of lukewarm on her as well, just like the favorite. I mean, she wouldn't shock me if she won, but she's not my cup of tea either in these maiden races because she's probably going to be pretty far back and have to make a big run late.
Yeah, I didn't make her my top pick, but she just feels like the kind of horse that doesn't have that sexy look to her and might slip through the cracks from a wagering standpoint. So I think she definitely has the prior races and speed figures to beat this field. So I don't want to discount her. She's definitely one that I will use. But like I was saying, Craig, there are some second time starters in this race, horses with a little more upside. Who were you taking a look at?
Three of them are narrowed in on, and don't get me wrong, the six I will use in my pick fives. The eight I probably will not. Clover Street, Dream on Kara, she has the figure, so she'd be more a B or C for me. I guess I'll just go in post position order with the horses I wanted to mention. The first one is Ichiban, the drawn inside for Linda Rice, and the way Linda Rice is going right now, it's kind of hard to toss anything that she's running. She's just winning races left and right. The one cautionary tale with her is though she does great with horses first off the claim. When I looked her up for this, horses in the just new to her barn, not off the claim. She was 0 for 9 in the with horses who are making their second career start. So horses just like this one who had lost their maiden race, moved to the Linda Rice barn, and that included some pretty heavy favorites. But it's a pretty small sample the way she's going right now. I don't want to dismiss this horse. I expect a pretty big improvement from one that's coming from the fairgrounds, ran a 62 figure, which compared to the favorite who ran a 69 in her best race, it's not a huge leap to think she could be right there with some others. Um, the next one was the five horse Northway, second time for Ray Handel. Took a lot of money first time out. He's a guy who does improve horses second time out, so I think you have to take this one pretty seriously. And the other lightly raced horse would be the seven. It's a third time starter for Mike Maker. He's a guy that just brings him along pretty slowly. He doesn't win a lot first out, gets a little better second out, gets a little better again third time out. Ran a 66 last time. Certainly could improve again some more. Does concern me she doesn't have a lot of speed, but she also gets second time Lasix, which is a good stat for Mike Maker.
Yeah, I considered all of those horses. I like some better than others. I'll definitely use the rail horse, Ichiban. I saw those same stats for Linda Rice. She's not great off trainer switches like this, but this horse did face a better field at the fairgrounds on debut. And while she was never really competitive that day and didn't do a whole lot of running, physically, she looks to me like a horse that's supposed to get better with added ground. By street sense, she's a half to Ava's Grace, who was a graded stakes placed routing horse on the dirt. So I think Ichiban makes plenty of sense going a little bit longer in here. Northway is coming out of that same race where Clover Street was second, and she just ran okay to me. As you said, right handle does do well with second time starters, but I thought she'd really need to improve. And, Craig, when I watched that race that My Angel's coming out of, that February 11th affair, I mean, I could not come out of that race and prefer My Angel to the number 3, Crystal Air, who just ran right by her in the stretch. And I know the 3, Crystal Air, is going out for connections that you don't think of as winning very often on this circuit, just some lower profile trainer and jockeys. But Crystal Air, I mean, she was out the back door early, didn't break that well, was just kind of sluggish in the early going and a little green. But once Jackie Davis got into her at the top of the stretch, she was just flying by horses in the final quarter mile of that race and actually did not stop after the wire and actually galloped out almost up to the winner, Monroe, who was much the best that day for trainer Todd Pletcher. And I know the speed figure came back on the light side, but this horse really figured it out in the second half of that race on debut. And being a daughter of Keen Ice, I think any extra ground is going to benefit her. So I like Crystal Air quite a bit in this race, and I think she's going to be a decent price. So she's one that I will use along with the number 1 and number 6.
I have no issues with her. I am a little concerned that maybe that run was a little bit of an illusion for a not very fast race. That race actually had quite a fast pace. There was a Todd Pletcher runner who was 1 to 5 and was just way better than everybody else. But that kind of makes it a stronger race compared to some of these. So yeah, I have no issue with her. She's one who will be running late. I just think the connections were a little bit of a concern for me.
Moving on to the seventh race. This is an $8,000 claiming race. Truly the bottom level that they run on the NYRA circuit. We only see a handful of these $8,000 races through the winter months. This one is going the 1 turn mile distance, and we've got a large field signed on here, Craig. There's an entry involved, a lot of horses that are dropping down in class, some with unreliable form. I guess the number 4 Vintage Hollywood could go favorite here just because he's a horse that has run competitively at higher levels than this, and he's dropping down to this $8,000 level for the first time. But he's not exactly one that finds the winner's circle that often.
No, as a matter of fact, I went back and counted, and it was so many. Excuse me if I got the number a little wrong, but I think he's on a 19 race losing streak, which for a former stakes winner, and I'm pretty sure his last win was an off the turf stakes race, the Kingston, which came at Belmont. Uh, that's an awful lot to take for a horse who is pretty. I mean, he's just in really poor form lately. Two back, he did run okay for 10,000. He stepped up for whatever reason, I don't know. He didn't run very well that day, so now he plunges even more. And I can understand people. He has the speed figures to win for sure, particularly if you ignore the last race. But it's hard for me to get excited about a horse like this that's lost 19 in a row and whose better days are just way, way behind him. Granted, it's an 8K claimer. There's a lot of horses in here whose better days are way behind them, but you're not going to be taking 2 to 1 on them.
There is some speed signed on here, and I'm looking at the TimeformUS pace projector. We are predicting a fast pace in this race, and I have no idea what to do with the horse that's shown on the early lead, the number 10 Swift Tap, who, for Rob Atras, prior to the claim by Michelle Nevin, this horse was running the kind of races that would have made him 8 to 5 against this field, if not lower than that. But his 2 starts since the claim, albeit against tougher company, have just been dreadful. So I don't know what we're going to get from this horse.
No, and as I said, I don't follow Naira as closely as you do, but the Rob Atras barn has been really, really hot. Now, this claim took place, I think, before that streak started, so I don't want to put too much into that, but the form has just been so bad. Granted, at higher classes, the question I have for this horse was, or the note I have on this horse was just a really weak maybe, just because he might find himself on a clear early lead. But he's just been so bad in those last couple races with no finish whatsoever in the stretch, particularly last time. Two back, you could say, well, it was a race where he was dueling on the lead on the front end. The last time out at a lower level, he kind of just gave it up before they had even gone a half mile. He started retreating. So most likely, at the very most, this horse would be a C type for me, just in a race with lots of other prices, because it's not like he's going to go off at some huge price either.
Yeah, I'll say the horse that I'm most interested in, and I'm guessing you're not going to disagree with me, Craig, though maybe I'm wrong. Sometimes I'm wrong about these things. I like the number 8, the Revenger. This is a horse who is primarily a Finger Lake specialist. That's where he's run most of his higher speed figures, so I always want to be somewhat wary of horses that don't bring that Finger Lakes form to NYRA, and he's had a couple of Aqueduct starts recently where he has really regressed from a speed figure standpoint. But what I will say about the Revenger is I just think they were running him at the wrong class level in those 2 recent NYRA starts. Those were New York bred allowance races that came up much, much tougher than the race that he's in today. I mean, last time out, he was facing off against Overstep, who came right back to win an N2X allowance race, actually beat some horses that we're going to talk about in the very tough allowance race that's coming up next. So the Revenger had no shot in there. And furthermore, this horse, let's just say, did not get the savviest ride from a jockey that I think gives a lot of questionable rides on this circuit in particular. And I really like this switch to Kendrick Carmouche. I think he's going to give this horse a smoother journey. He is a speed type, but not one that necessarily needs to be in front, so I'd be fine with him working out a stalking trip. And I just think he's dropping down to a level where he can be competitive.
Yeah, there's 2 horses that I would consider A's in here, and he is definitely one of them. They're almost, I would say, co-top picks. Not a whole lot to add. I mean, this is a horse who's run 21 times. He's only been in a claiming race 1 time, which is pretty rare for this field. And that 1 time he dropped into a claimer is the day he was claimed. He won that race by 7.5 lengths at Laurel. It was a non-winners of 2 for 16, so who knows if that's even the same class as this one, probably a little bit below, but the way he romped it just seems like he's finally going back to where he belongs. He's been racing way over his head. Even at Finger Lakes, he had some nice races, but he wasn't able to get the job done. The ride last time was ridiculous, to say the least. There was a replay I watched a few times, so he's one that is definitely an A for me. The other A for me is on the inside, the two Icy Storm, and that's just more of a trainer play. The trainer Antonio Arriaga is 20% second off the claim with a 2.280 ROI. He does okay first off the claim, but he gets even better. I think first time it was like 17%, 1.83 ROI. So he really improves him second time out. And this horse has some back races that make him possible. It shows that he bled last time, so he's been given a little time. Comes back, so I'm looking for a pretty good race from him as well.
Yeah, I'm not totally against him because he does have back races going longer that would make him a major player in here. The drop in for the 8,000 bothers me a little bit. I know he's run very cheaply in the past, but this is a horse that had gotten into some good form for his prior connections and just seems like maybe he's gone the wrong way a little bit again, though he did show some signs of life sprinting in that last race, even though there is that comment that he bled. He actually ran just fine and was really finishing through the wire that day. Don't totally trust this rider to work out a trip from the rail, but for that reason, I think this horse is going to be a bigger price than he otherwise would have been based on the form. So I don't blame you for taking a look at him. And the other horse that I would mention in this race is the number 7 Forever Wicked. Kind of along the same lines. He's a horse that figures to be closing at the end. I think he actually has the best late pace rating of anybody in this field in a race that is supposed to feature some pace. And he's faced better horses, at least last time out, since the claim by David Jacobson. And, I don't know how much of a move up it is because this horse was actually in pretty good form for Randy Persaud, who has had a decent winter at Aqueduct prior to the claim. But he just seems like one that probably fits at this level. He was competing in some of those condition claiming races prior to going to Jacobson. And those horses tend to not do so well when they're run for the same price at the open level. So dropping down to 8,000 is probably where this horse belongs. And if things really come apart at the end, he's going to be the one making the last move.
Yeah, he's one I wanted to mention as well. It's kind of crazy scrolling through his TimeformUS past performances, and that this horse basically runs the same speed figure every single time that he races. Doesn't matter what barn it is. It's always within a couple lengths. It's once in a while will crack the low 90s, or he'll hit the low 90s. Sometimes it'll be low 80s, but for the most part, he's right there in those mid 80s, and he's going to need a fast pace because he makes that late run. But he's one I'm interested in because I do think he's going to get that fast pace with horses like Swift Tap and the Entry, who we haven't really talked about. I'm assuming neither one of us particularly like them, but the one horse does have some pretty good early speed as well. So I do think things are going to heat up on the front end, just as the pace projector shows.
Yeah, I struggle with entries because you're almost always going to like one more than the other. And on the one that you like, you're taking a shorter price than you otherwise would because he's got that entry made in the race that's going to be dragging down his price. And I probably do prefer the 1A Crypto Cash in this race, but his price is going to be dragged down by the presence of Kumar. And Crypto Cash has a rider on board that I would not be wanting to take at any kind of short price. So let's move on to the next race, Craig, where we have that same conundrum, the presence of an entry, and this is one that is going to be a very short price. You have two horses that are contenders, though I think Ouster, the number 1A, is certainly the stronger half of this entry for trainer Mark Hennig and Windy Lee Farm. He's just been in great form recently. I mean, ever since they stretched him out in distance, he's been running races that are significantly better than he had going shorter. First showed some improvement on the turf, and he's carried that over to the dirt this winter at Aqueduct. Was an impressive winner over a sloppy track 2-back, and then was just a narrow loser last time against a pretty tough field at this level. He's arguably facing a softer N2X this day than he did last time when he was beaten by that good Todd Pletcher trainee Overstep.
He is, and I'll be honest, I had some questions when I pulled up that chart and saw the speed figures and a bunch of horses and improved in there all around 10 points, and I would still consider it iffy. But because of that, I went back and looked at the card. It was smack dab in the middle. I think there maybe it was the fifth race, but there were races at similar distances right before it, right after it. They've all checked out fine. Nobody's really run back from this race, but the figure seems to fit and it kind of towers over this field. So I think Alster is definitely the horse to beat. The one negative, as you mentioned, is he's going to have an entry mate who's in good form. It's not like he's an entry mate who would be 30 to 1 if he was on his own. So he's going to drag that price down probably to odds on.
Yeah, and the other negative with Ouster, aside from the lack of value there, is that neither half of this entry has that much early speed. Ouster, I think he's shown just behind Full Moon Fever on the pace projector. I mean, maybe Ouster has slightly more positional speed than his entry mate, but it's not like either one is that fast in the early going. And when I scroll through this field, a lot of the horses that you would tab as contenders are closing types. Hush of a Storm, who's got some nice speed figures, Whittington Park. I mean, they come from off the pace, and I think that there are two horses in this field that project to get pretty good trips up close to what I think is going to be a moderate pace. And the horse that I'm most interested in is the number 2, Sundays with Sandy. You know, we talk about how Ouster's last speed figure is kind of a standout. Well, the only horse that comes close is Sundays with Sandy, who's got this sort of sticks out like a sore thumb 117 TimeformUS speed figure in his last start. And you'll say, where the heck did that come from? Because while he had run some decent races in the past, nothing that quite measures up to that level. I do think it helped him that he got free on the front end that day and was able to dominate that race, leading from start to finish. Also, he was benefiting from the fact that he dropped in for a tag against a weaker field than what he's facing here, so he got to boss around some inferior rivals. But Craig, that's a number that does check out. I mean, he won by almost 14 lengths, and we've had plenty of runbacks out of that race that have since repeated their speed figures, so it seems like that's a legitimate number that he earned. If he can repeat that here, he's a major player. And I will say, this is a horse that has sometimes had trouble getting out of the gate. That's why he hasn't always shown the amount of speed that he did last time. But this apprentice that he switched to last time, Jaime Torres, we've seen be very aggressive on the horses that he's riding. So I think the intention, once again, is going to be to get this horse out to the lead. And if he's able to establish that front-running advantage once again here, I don't want to just dismiss him, even as he's switching into a new barn, that of Jamie Begg.
Yeah, that's the one negative for me, the switch to the new barn out of the Rudy Rodriguez barn. I'm not all that familiar with these connections. Maybe when I'm done, you can shed some light on them if you have any. But he's a horse who's going to be clear on the front end. Like you said, that 117 speed figure, I think, is totally legitimate. Um, and there's just not a lot of other speed in here. The horse we have shown second in the pace projector is Listen to Your Heart, a horse who never really leads his races. He hasn't been on the lead in the front end. Even the one time he tried a route a mile and a 16th, he was battling for the lead. But I just don't think he's as fast, naturally fast as Sundays with Sandy. So if that one gets out of the gate, I mean, why not? Who knows what light bulb went on last time? Maybe it was just being on the lead, but I don't think it was one of those big speed bias days or anything like that.
No, I mean, there were definitely some lopsided margins that day. So, I mean, you tend to see that during the winter at Aqueduct. This is something that we've talked about privately before, Craig, that you do sometimes get these outlier performances in the middle of winter at Aqueduct that sometimes seem like they happen in a vacuum and are not repeated. But I'm not so sure that's necessarily what happened with Sundays with Sandy, because he did have that big win back in November 11th. And, you know, Jamie Begg, he was the former assistant, I think actually the New York assistant for Mark Cassie. So he's been around some good horses before and got off to a slow start, training on his own in 2021, especially 2022. I think he was just something like 2 for 50. But he's actually having a nice Aqueduct meet. He sent out 9 runners, just 2 wins, but 7 of them have hit the board, and it's not like he's sending out a bunch of favorites. So I think that this barn is starting to do okay, and they claimed this horse for $25,000, and now they're running him in a protected spot. They're not entering for the $45,000 tag like they could have. So I think, at least for now, they're not saying that they think they made a bad claim or anything. So I expect this horse to actually run well if he's able to get out of the gate. And then, you brought up the number 3, Listen to Your Heart. He's another one that I would want to use in this race. I'm a little bit concerned about the 1 mile distance. That could be a bit far for him, but he ran well last time, chasing a very fast pace that was coming apart towards the end. And he did hang a little bit in the late stages, but I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that he was going so quickly, chasing that pace on the front end. And he's got some prior speed figures that do put him in the mix, so I'll also use him, just trying to take some shots against this heavy favorite Ouster.
Yeah, there's a couple other horses I wanted to mention. I'm not as big a fan of as you are on the three because of the distance question. The one time he tried it, he was kind of backing up through the lane. All the other times I've been 7 furlongs or less. He's in good form. I just worry that with a horse like the two in here, things could get tough for him. There's a couple horses I just wanted to mention with trainer angles that I like who are going to be more of a price. The shorter of those two is the four Hush of a Storm. Comes back for trainer Bill Morey. And second off a layoff, I mean, this horse has good speed figures. He ran a 110 last time. The time before that on dirt, before a long layoff, he had run a 115. So he fits in here. He's been in races without a lot of pace. And what really stuck out to me was Bill Morey does really good. He does good off a layoff, but second off the layoff, he's much better with a 2.74 ROI. I think both off the layoff and second, the win percentage is around 18. But he gets his horses ready. So that's one I wouldn't want to totally dismiss, especially if things get hot up front. And the other one is the six horse doing it the right way for Linda Rice. Doesn't look like he belongs in this race. Maybe he'll scratch. That seems to happen a lot when I like a Linda Rice horse a bit, but it's hard to ignore her numbers off the claim. I pared them down to just the past year, and they're pretty ridiculous. She's 30% off the claim the past year in 100 starts with a 2.43 ROI. The one concern would be that she's taking this claimer and jumping him up into an allowance race. But when I looked that stat up, she's 31% with a 2.85 ROI. So at 20 to 1 on the morning line, that's just one there's no way I'm not going to have her on my tickets.
Yeah, it is a weird horse to see in this race. Sometimes you see Linda Rice making these moves when she has a second horse in the race that she's trying to make it go for, and that's not the case this time, so maybe you want to give an extra look to this horse. I will say, I obviously I'm aware of those same Linda Rice stats. She's just had an amazing run of success with these claims, especially over the past 6 months. Those stats indicate she's winning with a lot of short prices, horses that are around 3 to 1 on average, and this one is going to be a gigantic price, so I'm not sure that this horse fits the profile of a lot of horses that Linda Rice is winning off the claim with. But I mean, look, you ignore that barn at your own risk at this time of year because this is when she tends to do her winning. And, as for horses like Hush of a Storm in Whittington Park, I think it all comes down, Craig, to how much you trust that speed figure coming out of that Overstep Ouster race, because there are a few horses that are nice numbers in there that we'll see if they're able to back it up here. Move on to the ninth race, the feature race on this card. It is the Cicada, this one for the 3-year-old fillies going 6 furlongs. Craig and I did a longer form stakes preview of this race that you can find on the Daily Racing Form YouTube channel, where we talk about every one of the 6 contenders in depth. Craig, I think we're going to have a clear favorite in here from the Linda Rice barn with the number 3 Downtown Mischief, a horse that's just done nothing wrong in her 2 starts so far. She's sat off slow paces, so she's gotten good trips in both starts, but she's finished up nicely each time, and just seems like this isn't coming up as the toughest open company stakes race for a New York bred.
It does not, but she is a horse who, it's interesting when you look at the Timeform US preview page, we just kind of list the spotlight figure for each horse. And it's not like she doesn't have the traditional look of an even money morning line shot. Her spotlight figures a 95, the 2 horses inside her are 95 and 94. The others all have 90 or low 90 to mid 80. So it's not like she's as dominant speed figure wise as the morning line would have you suggest. And not that I'm arguing with her morning line. I'm sure it's spot on. She's going to take a lot of money with that 2 for 2 perfect record, 2 easy wins, but I'm not sure her edge is as strong as it probably looks at first glance.
Yeah, she is the kind of horse that's just never going to look as good on the Timeform US data because twice in a row, she's gotten that pace downgrade. She's been in some slower paced races, so she looks much better on final time speed figures than she does on the Timeform US speed figures, which, if you're a regular listener to this podcast, you know horses that benefit from slow paces in dirt sprints, they get pace downgrades and their speed figures are lowered, and that's happened to her twice in a row. So, Craig, I think that's an interesting discussion point because it remains to be seen what kind of trip she's going to work out in this race. She definitely has some tactical speed, but there are some other horses in here that are going to be angling for forward position. So I don't think it's a guarantee that she's going to get that same perfect trip just sitting outside one other rival and then taking over.
No, I mean the pace projector shows three other horses in front of her, the two, four, and five, and they all have legitimate chances to make the lead. They've either been in fast races with red fractions, or they've been right up on the front end in races with slower paces, just like she does. So I think there's a lot of different directions to go. I think the most logical alternative is the horse you tabbed as the 5-2 choice on the morning line, shipping in from Indiana for Rudolph Brissett, and that's Hot Little Thing, the two horse. And she's one of those horses with just a lot of speed. She had won two races in a row in romps, including a nice maiden win. Then she moved into Indiana Bred Stakes Company, which is obviously a step down in class, but won by 15 with a big figure. And she ran those similar figures as a early fall 2-year old. So I think she's the one that you have to start with as the most dangerous foe.
Yeah, I think Hot Little Thing makes a lot of sense here. She is a shipper in this race. I mean, there are a few shippers in this race, but she's the kind of shipper that, I don't think that Rudy Brissett, who has this horse that shows some talent as a 2-year-old, is going to ship all the way to Aqueduct if he's expecting a bad effort out of her. I think that she's probably doing well coming in for this 3-year-old debut. And furthermore, if you look up the stats in Formulator, Rudolph Brissett has a positive ROI coming off this kind of layoff. I think I looked up 120 to 240 days in dirt races over the past 5 years. So I expect her to run well, and I think both of her last two sprints are strong efforts. I know one of them shows a much higher TimeformUS speed figure than the other one, that 14-length stakes victory, but even her maiden race that she won by 7 lengths, that's a race out of which many horses have come back to improve their speed figures by substantial margins. So I think that Hot Little Thing stacks up pretty favorably in terms of the speed figure data with the favorite Downtown Mischief. And as you said, with any routine improvement through maturity, I think she's going to be a serious rival, and I do expect her to be a slightly better price. But Greg, I know there's another horse that you're somewhat interested in that also has some upside.
Yeah, I like the four horse fabulously funny for Anthony Dutrow. He's a guy who doesn't have them fully cranked first time. She ran okay. She came back second time and broke her maiden, albeit against a couple horses who don't like to find the winner's circle and are actually running today, to the day we record. So that might be a race worth watching. But she ran an 88, just improved 1 point, but she just looked more professional to me. She showed more early speed, which isn't a surprise. And I think she's got another forward step in her, and it doesn't have to be a giant step. It was another figure which got downgraded a little bit because of the pace. She had a 91 final time figure that day. So I was just looking for a little more value, and she's one that I think has every right to take a nice step forward. Should be tracking outside a couple of the other speed horses. Should get a good trip for Kendrick Carmouche. So she's just one I think is going to offer some real value in here.
Yeah, I don't really have a big argument with any of that. I didn't love her maiden victory last time. I was expecting a little bit more of a step forward, but she does still have some upside and only her third career start for trainer Tony Dutrow. Let's move on to the final leg of this sequence. Some more New York breds. This is again a maiden special weight event like the first leg that we talked about, but this one is for the New York bred males. The 3-year-old colts and geldings going 7 furlongs, and we have a field of 10 signed on here, Craig. And this race features the kind of favorite, or at least morning line favorite. We'll see if this horse does go off favored in the number 9 Lifetime of Chance, who I am just always going to be against. This horse has had plenty of chances already, really just inherent in his name, Lifetime of Chances. That's been the story so far, and he just has not seized the opportunity yet, picking up minor awards in his races. And what I don't like is for a trainer like Linda Rice, who generally gets the best out of her horses at this time of year, he just threw in a real clunker last time as the 3-5 favorite against what I thought was a weaker field than the one that he's facing today. So he is not the kind of horse that I want to endorse as the potential favorite.
No, no doubt about it. He's lost his last two at 3-5 and 7-5. Even before that, I mean, he's pretty much taken money every time since that first time out. He runs okay. He has that look of a horse who just doesn't want to find a winner's circle, and he's probably going to be the favorite again. So I definitely think there's some others to go with. I'll start with just one and throw it back to you, but there's a few I want to talk about, and that's the three horse Art of Courage. This is a horse who ran a 76 on the Timeform US, looks maybe a little bit over his head, but he's a trainer who does very well second time out. He wins at 25% with maiden special weight second time out, a $2.50 ROI with those runners, and the horse did take some money first time out, going off at only 10-1 in that field. As for a guy that doesn't win all that much first time, was wide all the way around the track. So he's one I'm looking for a big improvement from.
And I'll give one other reason to like Art of Courage, who I'm also considering in this race. February 9th at Aqueduct, that was a day where you really wanted to be on the rail. It seemed like there was a mild bias that day, and as you said, Art of Courage was outside the entire way. That's also a race that Lifetime of Chance comes out of, and actually Lifetime of Chance beat Art of Courage, but Art of Courage was basically in the four path around the turn, while Lifetime of Chance was kind of not on the rail, but in the two path, so I do think Art of Courage had the worst trip, and he does have upside. My one reservation with this horse, Craig, is that he has one full brother who is really much more of a turf horse, a horse named Me and Sap, who's a three-time turf winner on the Naira circuit. And I do wonder if he's one that's ultimately going to be best on the grass, but he definitely has room to move forward because, as you said, Horacio De Paz has those great stats with second-time starters. I'll mention some other lightly raced horses that I'm interested in. The number 4, Run and Score, makes a lot of sense to me. This is a horse who has run twice before, but he just has one start on the dirt when he came to Aqueduct last time, and he caught a muddy track that day. It was actually just 2 weeks ago. He ran on the Gotham Day undercard, and I really liked his performance. He got out run in the early stages, but it's not like that was a race that featured a ton of pace, and he was really running at the end, and really the only horse that was making up that kind of ground through the stretch. Nobody else was closing with the speed that he was, and you could just see it in the turnover of his stride. He just really picked up the pace and was responding to the encouragement from rider Katie Davis. And even after the wire, he ran out alongside the winner, Signal Corp, who was a well-meant horse from the Todd Pletcher barn, a first-time starter, and this horse was just zooming right past him on the gallop out. So feels like something really clicked. The light bulb went off for Run and Score in his first time on dirt last time, and I think he might have another move forward in him. I like slightly more ground for this son of Run Happy. I think the 7 furlongs is really going to work out for him. And, with the connections, Laura Woller's training and Katie Davis, I don't think he's going to take that much money here, at least not to be favored. So I like Run and Score. And also the number 5, Mudville 9. There are a number of horses in here that are coming out of races that I just did not think were that strong, and I think that Mudville 9 actually faced some decent rivals on debut. The winner of that race was a first-time starter that looks to have some potential. There were other horses in that race that were second-time starters who had already run well, and Mudville 9 would just put in a gritty effort to keep battling on to secure third that day, so feels like another one that's going to appreciate a little bit more ground and probably won't be that short a price for a trader, Mike Trombetta, that just generally doesn't take that much money when he ships to the Naira circuit.
Yeah, and he's a guy that doesn't do much first time out, improves a little second time out. The horse certainly fits. Run and Score certainly fits. Not a whole lot to add. They're definitely both horses I would use. The one other one I wanted to mention was the 7, and get your take on it since you made the morning line for a Christophe Clement first time starter at 6-1. I mean, obviously he's a guy who wins a lot first time out. I was surprised. I looked them out. I looked them up with first-time starters are obviously very good, but I was wondering just how much of that comes in turf races, particularly turf sprints. So I narrowed it down to dirt only, and it actually goes up. He wins 23% with a 2.2 ROI, so pretty healthy. Suggests he's not winning with long shots very often, but a barn like his isn't going to because he's going to take money. But this one seemed pretty dangerous to me in a field that's not that strong.
And in terms of pedigree, this one is a full brother, also by a Fleet Alex, to Listen to Your Heart, who we just talked about in that allowance race for these same connections. Christophe Clement actually started out training Listen to Your Heart before he was switched to Ray Handel, and he did win his debut in a dirt sprint, so there are some reasons to like I'm Just in this race. The workouts are primarily at Payson down in Florida. I don't know what to make of those. He had one workout here that appears to me to have been in company with a horse named Engineer Empire, who was fifth on debut for Christophe Clement a couple of weeks ago, so make of that what you will. But one to consider, and I'll just throw one more name out there, Craig, that's going to be a price, and that's the number 6, October Bliss. This horse, he's moving up in class off the claim. He's done his, achieved his best results against maiden claiming $40,000 runners, so some people might view that as a negative, but I don't think this horse wanted to go a mile. He ran like one that wants a turn back in distance. He would get there in the stretch and then sort of shut down in the final furlong. I know that he didn't run well from a result standpoint in his prior starts against Maiden Specialweight Company, but that November 26th race that he's coming out of has been extremely productive. The strongest New York bred maiden race that's probably been run anywhere for this entire crop, and he didn't run that badly in there. So I think this one is going to appreciate the turn back and is just not the kind of horse that's going to take money in a race like this. So he's one that I do want to include as a backup.
I wanted to make a case for him, but the trainer stats are just a little too bad for me. Bruce Brown has some of the worst off the claim stats that you're going to see. I think it was 3 for 70 first time off the claim. When I changed it to just maidens, it's hard to make any stat like that any better, and it didn't get any better. So claiming off Linda Rice in this spot for me was a little tough to take. But if he runs good, you're going to get paid.
Well, let's do a brief review and go back through this sequence. We've mentioned a lot of horses. Let's kind of just talk about who we might want to key on to make this an affordable play for the bettors.
Yeah, in that first leg, I mentioned quite a few. I'll be honest, it's a sequence. It's going to take some work to come up with a ticket because there's a lot of horses, a lot of big fields. I think you have to use the Linda Rice horse, Ichiban from the rail, just the way she's been going. Some others we mentioned, Northway is one that I like for Ray Handel, the horse who Crystal Air also came out. Crystal Air beat, who was it? My Angel. I like a lot of the lightly raced horses. Northway, My Angel, Crystal Air, you made a good case for in Ichiban. I don't really have a key in that race. I guess if I had to make a top pick, it would probably be the 5-horse Northway, but I'll be spreading in that one for sure. In the $8,000 claiming race, race number 7, even though it's a big field, there wasn't a whole lot of horses. I was going to key on, I know we mentioned a few. I'll just mention the 2 who will be my A's. The 2-horse Icy Storm, I really like the trainer stats there. And the 8-horse The Revenger, who's just second time ever in a claimer, romped the first time, and just seems like a really logical horse to me in here. In the 8th, another one, we mentioned a lot of horses. Just shows how competitive these races actually are. But a couple that drew my interest that are going to be a price were the 4-horse Hush of a Storm for Bill Murray, who does very well second off a claim. And we didn't really like the entry in here. I know the entry has the flashy speed figure, but as you mentioned, I hate taking that, so not really one for me. And I'm going to use the Linda Rice first off a claim, even though she's a big price. The 6-horse doing it the right way. Those stats are just a little too hard for me to pass up. In the 9th, I'm going to avoid the favorite here. I just think she's going to take way too much money. Use a couple others, mostly Fabulously Funny and Hot Little Thing. They would be the 2 that I would lean on. In the last race, that maiden special weight for the boys, I'm going to stick with the lightly raced horses, avoid the favorite again, like Art of Courage, Run and Score, and Mudville 9.
And for me, in that first leg, I like that long shot, second time starter, Crystal Air. I think that she is just going to take a step forward in her second start. And I'll also use the 1 Ichiban and the number 6 Dream on Kara as my main uses in that race. In the 7th race, I like the Revenger the most. He might actually be an A for me, and I'll use some backups beyond that, or I should say my only A. And those would include the 7 Forever Wicked. I'm not going to let Vintage Hollywood beat me because I've got opinions elsewhere that, I'll cover him. And then the 2-horse Icy Storm that Craig mentioned, he's another one that I could throw onto my tickets. Crypto Cash, a difficult call because I think he's a contender, but as part of that entry, I'm not sure that the value is going to be there. In the 8th race, I like the 2 Sundays with Sandy. I just think the likely ride he's going to get, aggressive enterprising tactics, could really work in this race, and the price should be fair with a lot of people not being familiar with this trainer that he's going first off the claim for. So he's the one that I want to key on here, and listen to your heart, I'll use Ouster a little bit as a backup, but because I'm not against him, I just think that there's going to be some negative value on Ouster, although he can certainly win this race and arguably is the most likely winner. In the 9th race, the Cicada, I'll primarily use those 2 favorites, Hot Little Thing and Downtown Mischief, potentially pressing Hot Little Thing a little bit more because I do think she's just as likely to win the race as Downtown Mischief, and there's just going to be more value there. So they're the 2 for me. And then in the 10th race to close it out, I'll spread a little bit. The ones that I like the most are Run and Score, Mudville 9, and Art of Courage. And then a little bit of that number 6, October Bliss, who I agree with Craig. Those stats off the claim are a little scary, but this one's going to be a big price, so I don't want to worry about that stuff too much. And he's one that will make his way onto my tickets.
Yeah, he's the kind I will definitely play in some vertical bets. So I just want to say I hope people don't mind that we didn't go with the flashy card this time. We're going to have plenty of that coming up. But there was a sequence that I really enjoyed handicapping. Probably going to need a nap because it took some work after that. But I know we talked about it a little bit offline after the pace cast. We start again with the Derby preps, and I think the Derby is now 7 weeks away. But what really catches us by surprise is with the way the schedule has changed, we basically only have 3 more weeks of talking about Derby preps, and then there's basically a full 3-week gap until we get to the Kentucky Derby.
It's true. By the time we get to that second week in April, we're basically going to know who will be in the Kentucky Derby field. So it's going to come at us fast and furious with these final round of preps. And Craig and I will talk about it as much as we can, both on our stakes previews, of course, and our this TimeformUS Forecast. So make sure to catch our future shows covering all of that stuff. Everybody, hope you enjoyed this preview of Aqueduct on Saturday. Remember, you can always listen to these podcasts on DRF.com, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. Just make sure to subscribe to the Daily Racing Form channel. Again, thanks for tuning in, and make sure to catch our TimeformUS Pacecast when we recap this past week's racing next week.